Move on to the next item now. We've got a couple of a couple of big updates from our guests today. The first is from Kiwi Rail, and then we have City Rail Link following that. So I'd invite Andre, Bobby, Bevan and John to the front table. Welcome, folks. I believe there's a presentation to come on the screen, and I'll hand over to you guys to introduce yourselves and to proceed with the presentation.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Kia ora tātou. Nau mai, haere mai. Mā loli lei. Kia ora ana. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. Andre, the Chief Executive Officer for Below Rail, is unfortunately delayed in Christchurch, so you'll have to put up with me as GM Metros. And beside me I've got, this afternoon, I'll just operate the slide deck correctly. Let's just get this right. Here we go. Oh, that one. There we go. Cool. I've got Bobby Fisher, who's our Capital Program Manager and Director on my right, and then on her right we've got the Program Director for City Rail Link, which is Mr. Bevan Assank. So we'll be presenting, so you'll get a trifecta. So what we'll try to cover today for the Chair and for Council is an overview of where we are with our capital program of investment into the metros. We'll then go through our maintenance and renewals program update and how our current infrastructure is working towards CRL Day 1. We'll give you an overview of the Integrated Rail Management Centre, which opens on the 14th of March, and I hope, Mr. Mayor, you'll be coming to the opening. If you haven't received an invite, then the one should be on the way to you shortly. Our key objectives obviously today is to follow up on the Mayor's 9-point plan, which he gave to the Chief Executives of both Kiwi Rail, AOR and AT. Follow through on those, give them an update of where we are with that collaborative work as an alliance, and then we'll look at covering off some key objectives as listed. So firstly I'll hand over to Bobby and she'll take you through the capital program.
Thanks, John. Kia ora tātou. So I'll just provide a brief overview of this because I believe it has been presented before, but we have a series of major capital works programs that are all complementary to effectively running the CRL on opening. So what we've listed there is each of the projects individually and just outlined at a high level the benefits that they do provide and contribute to what CRL is trying to achieve. The key thing with the slide is our state of readiness for CRL opening. So just running through the list without going into too much detail, Wirrikī Park, which is the introduction of a new third main, is on track for completion. Target completion is January 25 or Q1 25. The second one there, Papakura to Pokekoi electrification, which is electrifying the network there that was previously only diesel services. That is on track for completion mid this year. The next two lines there are the Drury Rail Stations project. So we have 3 new rail stations that are being constructed, 2 of which will be ready in time for CRL opening. So that is an update, that is an improvement from what was previously reported in March. So we're going through a consenting process and reviewing design, value engineering, etc., which had meant that there was some uncertainty on our ability to meet that time frame, but that has now largely concluded, and we are on track for completing Drury and Pairata stations in time for CRL opening. The third station, Ngakaroa Station, which is previously referred to as Drury West Station, will be completed shortly after, so target completion for that is mid to late 2026. The next one there, the Western Power Feed project, which is introduction of a new substation to support power supply for CRL. That will be complete. It's expected to be complete Q1 next year. And the last two, the RMC, it will be complete shortly. Bevan Assank will talk to that in some later slides. And the rail network rebuild is the item that will have partial completion. So what we've done is a review of the highest priority requirements for that program, and what we've done is focused on the core areas of the Auckland rail network. So we're looking at completing the inner core by completion of by CRL day one. There are funding constraints that hamper our ability to deliver that full program of works, which John will talk to in later slides, but essentially that is a key area where our ability to be fully ready for the desired target reliability of CRL day one timetable is only going to be partially met. Thanks, John. The next couple of slides I won't talk to. Again, they have been presented previously, but it's just there for a brief recap. So this shows the overall target program of investment across the various disciplines and areas over the next 30 years. So KiwiRail, together with Auckland Transport, has put together a program business case mapping out our planned or target investment strategy for the next 30 years to grow and develop rail. These are just some highlights of where that targeted investment, what that investment will deliver. And the next slide, there's similarly just showing it on a map in terms of what the investment will deliver by area, by location. Again, this was talked to in detail at the March session, so I won't go through it unless there's any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Chair? For
Yeah, well, if there's any questions at this early stage, we might take them. Mayor Brown.
Yeah, I've got a question on this. When you look up north there, onto that page that you're on there now, you're doing up the trip to Oturia, and I can see all sorts of sleepers sitting on the ground amongst all the agapanthus that are growing through the lines. It strikes me it would be a far better investment to go from Whangarei out to the port. And I noticed in the government saying they want to improve the road to the port, but the road to the port's bloody good if anyone's ever driven on it. In fact, it's the best road in Northland. And so we're upgrading a perfectly good road, and we're not putting a rail where we need a rail, and we're upgrading a rail which is covered in agapanthus and hasn't had a train over it in living memory. So is there something wrong with the thinking there? Well, there is something wrong with the thinking. What is it that's produced such weird thinking?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think that's a $1 million question for. It would be good to use your alliance methodology with our chief executive and perhaps punt that up to government with respect to how we should link that Northland area to Auckland and relieve the problem we have with the port and the pressures we have. I think that's a strategic question above my pay grade, but I'm aligned with your thinking because it does make sense. We have a network there that is it is old. It will need renewal and will need funding, and we know that. We're upgrading it to take 18-tonne axle loadings to increase the freight loading, and we have a plan to have that reopened post the slip works in July of this year, so we can resume that. But it makes sense long term to have a strategy around capital program investment and ongoing maintenance to look at that as another corridor. I would agree with you in that thinking.
Well, then you should get your chief executive to write a letter to the Minister of Transport saying that he's spoken to me and he agrees entirely with my thinking and that you would like it to be brought into common sense. Okay, thank you very much for that.
Or you could write the letter too, Mr. Mayor, maybe. Shortcut things, you could write it.
Oh, I'm sure I'll be raising this as part of a broad range of issues which we are facing.
Okay, Andre, you have the second part of your presentation now.
Yes, John, but no, it's all good, Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Sorry,
John.
that's all good. He's far better looking than
sorry.
I. He's far better looking than I anyway. So, right, I'll go to the meat and potatoes of today's presentation, which is the issues here we face with the network, which is my mandate. The key takeaways from Mayor's 9-point plan strategically around the One Alliance approach to working to solve the disruption problems and to drive a better efficiency and reliability for our customer, and that was very clear. The second part I'll cover is disruption management. What proactive plan are we implementing now to do things differently, to relieve the pressure? what is the funding mechanism that we need, and we're working collaboratively with our partners in some very deep workshops. We've just finished with AT, AOR and Waka Kotahi in the room. That was conducted in Ellerslie last week, which has landed some really good results. And lastly, what is the risk profile to CRL day one? So just a quick sense check on where we are in terms of a roadmap. You will all know that we have our capital plan that Bobby's covered off to take us through to drive resilience and capacity for our network. That is in the form of the rail network rebuild. That funding is to address the long-standing formation issues that we have in our network, which is like the foundation of a house or an apartment block. If that's not fit for purpose, then the rail geometry won't be fit, and you have a network when you're running both commuter and freight trains over it that could be flawed or fractured. The immediacy of that project is to address, as Bobby said, the immediate issues. It will not, based on the funding limits, solve the complete network. It will solve a percentage of the network, circa 30 to 32%. The remainder of it will need to be replaced over time. And we've just finished our evidence-based asset management plan, which was a driver out of the Deloitte's report and the high-level review conducted and driven by AT in 2020 and 2021, which said that Kiwi Rail needed a far more evidence-based asset management plan. We have now landed that asset management plan, and we've shared that in detail with AT, AOR and Waka Kotahi last week to address the funding profile and mechanism we need for through-life operational OPEX funding to fund the network and leverage the $7.5 billion of capital investment that the government's made into Auckland with the CRL tunnel and the plan for the last 4 to 5 years. The way in which we'll enable CRL day one to be delivered is that we will actually introduce new ways of working as part of that funding mechanism. And we will be using automatic train inspection systems. These systems x-ray the rail. They view the rail in a train type vehicle. It allows us more reliability and an understanding of the rail health and condition. And we'll use that technology to then analyse the way in which we need to work more efficiently and smarter as we run more trains. What we are modifying now is the way in which we work by using both machine maintenance. You know, you see a lot of people, rail workers on the network using mandrolic or a lot of labour, for want of a better term. We're transitioning that methodology into an international best practice and bringing in through that funding mechanism and through the upgrade of our asset, a totally different way of working. The graph on the left shows you, on average, where the TSRs or the train speed restrictions that we've had to place on the network, where they've been in 2021 on average, it was around above 10 to 12 kilometres a year. Of a 200 kilometre network, there's 12 kilometres of it would have speed restrictions. We then in 2022, we lowered that down to around 7.8 kilometres. In 2023, it was around 6. At the moment, you'll see a slight escalation in as at 24. Those are as at June, February dates. The reason that is a slight spike is we came off the back of the most significant piece of Christmas work we'd ever done in the history of New Zealand Rail in Auckland, and the magnitude of that work was significant. And some of the fallout our customers saw as a result of that with the Britomart incident in February, where we actually changed the configuration of the Britomart station, and Bevan and I may touch on that later in the presentation, which caused significant amount of disruption. And even through our predictive analysis with risk at the time, 4 years earlier when we were planning this work, we assessed that disruption to be in around 1% threshold. That eventuated in being more than 1%, and that was the key result of the disruption. Reports and investigations have been completed, and we have a recovery plan that we've developed with both AOR and AT to minimise that going forward. This is a prediction of what the next 10 years look like for the people of Auckland, our customers. our patrons of the railway who want a modern metro. This shows you how contingent to rail health funding is. On the left-hand graph, you see a 10-year asset management evidence-based funding model. You'll see how low the disruption is. We can live within those disruption tolerances and deliver the CRL day one timetable, and the people of Auckland can get what they want. We need the funding. The middle graph shows you that if we only get a percentage of the funding, say 50% of the backlog that's left in maintenance to get us to steady state to run a railway at the right level of maintenance, we will still have disruptions, and we will have timetables that need cancellations or modifications to working. If we don't get any funding from the Crown to supplement the maintenance of the railway, the right-hand graph shows you how extreme the impact will be. We're talking 25, 26 kilometres of a 200-kilometre network being impacted by levels of disruption intermittently at different parts of the network. So you can see how pivotal the CapEx funding that's been provided by the Crown needs to be supported by the operational funding to maintain it. So what are we doing differently to make sure we minimise that risk and consequence to our customers and to work collaboratively with our partners? As I said on the 1st of March, we completed 3 whole days with AT, AOR and Waka Kotahi. We landed a very comprehensive evidence-based plan to take to the Crown to support through life funding for the next 10 to 22 years. It's evidence-based and it speaks for itself. There was common alignment around what we need to operate a mixed mode network, remembering we're supporting supply chain and we're also supporting a metro service. There was agreement around the 10-year asset management plan and matched funding. There was agreement that the methodologies we were going to adopt, which would be moving to preventative rather than reactive maintenance, using machine-enabled technology, which is already underway and will be implemented before day one, is the way forward. What it did identify is that if we are to be true as partners and as an alliance to run the CRL day one timetable, we need to understand there is risk and consequences to the current state of day one. And concessions will need to be made by the rail partners, both our freight regional trains, our long-distance trains and our commuter trains to run this timetable. That piece of work is extremely sensitive, and it is detailed, and it is ongoing, and it is at senior executive level, and it is urgent. I'll pause there, and before I hand to Bevan to give you an update on the improvements we are making with the Integrated Rail Management Centre, and take any questions, Mr Chair.
Okay, thanks, John. Any questions? Councillor Hills?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I did bring up my concerns about a month ago at the last meeting to the Chair and the Mayor at the time because of the, I think it was almost 20 days in a row that we had significant disruptions after the opening, and I think everyone was quite excited to see the tracks open again, and then it was a rolling mall. So that seems, and that was the week before the heat issue kind of brought it all to a public head anyway. Is there anything, obviously money's a huge issue, and I see that from reports today there may not be funding to do any of this work from Newlyn onwards, which is quite concerning, that potentially have run out of money to continue the work. But so I guess one question is, what happens if you don't get the money from government? And second is, are there things you can do, like what you presented there, but to section off parts of the network so that when there's a signal failure, or as we saw with the heat, 4 or 5 Ks of close down, so it doesn't affect the whole network, because it does seem to cascade And I know as a city we've not got many networks, we're unlucky, but are there other things you can be doing to address those signal failures?
I appreciate the question and I understand. Could I break that up to some component parts so I can give the answer to you correctly? What I might do is deal with the Britomart disruption first and what we've done to make sure we're mitigating that risk and to give customers confidence. I'm going to hand to Bevan to give you a background of what we've done to improve and mitigate that risk first, and then I'll transition to the next one. Bevan.
Thank you, John. So in terms of Britomart, what we did over Christmas is we implemented the CRL final track arrangement with its signalling and its overhead arrangement. So you've got to realise that Britomart fundamentally changes from being a turn-back terminus station to a through station, and it was when it was first built, the signalling system was fully optimised for operating it in that arrangement. But to allow us to move to CRL and to do the testing commissioning that is due to happen later this year, we had to put in a new track arrangement with signalling and all that. So unfortunately, what that does mean though is it means you optimise it for the through station movements, which will be great for CRL, but not necessarily as it's currently arranged for turn back and everything. So that's where the impact of that, combined with other issues on the network around those times, unfortunately tipped the timetable over the edge. So when you build your timetable, you obviously make some deliberate decisions around what buffers you need in there to manage issues and everything. And unfortunately, you can only build in so much, and if it goes too far over the edge, and unfortunately Britomart, the operational network, and then combined with, unfortunately, a points failure down there, just tipped us over the edge, and that unfortunately just carried on through for a number of days and everything, and caused obviously the disruption that we saw. So yeah. In terms of fixing it, we've already implemented a number of operational changes along with our train control and AOR, and we've also going to implement a couple more as well that we're working through with Siemens, which is our signalling partner, to ease that. Unfortunately, we can't fix it all because it's fundamentally changed, and we can't back the truck up on it either because we have now cast the die for CRL. Yeah.
And to the second part of your question, Councillor, is with respect to the heats and the TSRs. So when you've got a network that's under construction, and that's what we really have, we're running trains on a network that's being rebuilt, and we're also bringing an aged asset up to a steady state condition. We all understand that. Funding is part of it. And it is not an excuse that we should be having. We're not hiding behind the excuse of funding. The issue is it's quite challenging at times to manage the speed restrictions because they have to come on after we invasively maintain or repair the network, and that's just a compliance and a safety issue. What we are doing to actually change this is we're changing our way of working. So we're going to exactly what you talked about. We're going to what we call a more cyclic way of working, where we don't shut the network. We actually only shut sections of the network. And by CRL day one, we're going to be in a position where disruption is minimised based on the upgrade resilience projects Bobby talked about. We have the signalling system is well bedded in with Britomart, and we're going to be able to segment the network into 36 parts. Those 36 parts where we can segment the network have train pathways where we can segregate freight and we can segregate passenger services. What we will be able to do is rotate our maintenance in the evening, and the things like we've had in the past where the people of Auckland have been penalised with line shuts. Yeah. Going forward, we won't be shutting the network. We'll be looking at sections of the network with a 3-year headroom where we will say at 156 weeks, AT, AOR and KiwiRail as a collective in the Integrated Rail Management Centre will put out a joint comm statement and will say in 2028 we are going into Pukekohe, Papakura for this period, for this section for 2 weeks, and there will be bus replacements needed, but it'll be 3 years out. It will not be reactive. There is going to be a little bit more pain, and I say that openly and truthfully. There will be a little bit more pain between now and CRL day one as we get to a smooth state across the network, but our aim is to minimise that disruption by working differently and giving our customers more assurance and reliability around the trains running. And we're changing our method of operating.
That is really, really, really good news. And I guess just to follow up to that, and maybe also if you could answer the concern if we don't get the funding for Newlyn onward, or you might be too hard because you're not in political positions, but the last bit is, will we ever get to a stage, and I think it's because we just have one network, so it shows up easier than other cities, but that we won't have shutdowns every long weekend, every Christmas. Is there a way to do things at night or different times? I know that's harder on workers, but it does feel really difficult in the summer that no one can use the network. Will it ever get to that with one network, or is it just too hard?
I'll get Bobby to answer the first part, and then I'll on dollars, and then I'll come back to you on the methodology. Yeah.
Thanks, John. So in terms of the scenarios, should we not get additional funding, the series of graphs that were up earlier are an assessment of what that might look like. So where we're at is, and we're working really hard in the background in discussions with Waka Kotahi and ministers to try to secure that additional funding. So where we're at now is we've identified for some time that the funding available through the Ringham program is insufficient to allow us to complete all of the high priority works. And so what we've done is, of the available budget we have, we've prioritised that, largely focused on the core network, and we've mapped out what that might look like. That's effectively what's summarised in those graphs. So worst case outcome is a couple of scenarios there where if we don't get additional funding to complete those high priority works, we are looking at some level of speed restriction. So what we'll do to front foot that, and part of it is, which we haven't come to, is that integrated rail management centre, is by working closely with our partners AT and AOR, because we're going in with a planned approach. It's a forward-looking approach on how we would manage the network offering to account for the fact that we should expect some level of disruption on the network.
Last part, Mr. Chair, I know we've pushed for time. Just the last part with respect to the model. AT and AOR are brought into the model. The last graph shows you actually can't run a railway, right? If you don't get the investment, that last option on the right, you can't run a railway. And that was the landing we came to. So we need the first two. The first one's what we actually need. There is no other option but the Rolls Royce. In terms of the methodologies, there is a maintenance management plan which talks about cyclically rotating crews around lines, working by day, working between trains, using special systems. That is probably 3 years away, but we will be doing exactly that to minimise the disruption at weekends and other areas within the network, so that our customers can have a proper modern metro.
Okay, all right. Thanks, John. Bevan, is there another part to the presentation? The final one?
Sorry, just very quickly, Mr. Chair. I'll get Bevan to cover very quickly in 1 minute the IRMC.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about the build and the disruption and all that. One of the key aspects for managing this disruption, one of the ways we're going to improve that, is obviously the Auckland Integrated Rail Management Centre. So this is to combine the train control staff from KiwiRail with the Auckland One Rail operational staff. So when we have an issue, we are able to collectively brainstorm that, problem solve it, and then implement that as quick as possible to recover the network. So that's the intention. The building's all complete. The staff move in later this month, and there's an opening on the 14th, and we'll start running out of there early April.
Okay, impressive looking building. Is there any other questions anyone's got? Or we've had a really comprehensive update from the KiwiRail team there. We have got a couple, John, if you wouldn't mind just answering a couple more. We're a little over time, but there's been a lot of very engaged councillors over our rail neck in previous times. So we have just got the three, Fletcher, Bartley and Ferry.
Thank you very much for the comprehensive and well-considered presentation to us. I want to know what KiwiRail have got in line in terms of support for Auckland Council on advocacy around grade separation?
With respect to grade separation, we're working collaboratively with AT in terms of the whole package. AT have been leading on the grade separation and pedestrian crossing removal program. That's being led by them, and we're providing all of the supplementary support in terms of design and delivery of works. They are actually leading on that, councillor, so they would be better placed to give an overall
I
strategy.
do understand that, but I want to know what additional support you can bring by way of advocacy, because my great concern is that people are not going to realise the importance of this until the CRL opens, and then it will be people will wonder, you know, why has this not been given greater consideration?
I think, that's one for obviously for Andre and Dave Gordon, and also the Chief Executive. I'll take a note, Mr Chair, to take this back to answer the councillor's question at the next briefing and give it an update.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, John. Councillor Bartley?
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to ask, like, how will you guys, keep the people out there, the communities on board with what's happening, especially with expected more disruptions and, socialising that, because people like myself have the perception that because the Eastern Line was closed for 9 months, we're all good now, no more disruptions going to carry on, but that's not the case. Thanks.
That's a very good point, and that was made very clear by Mr Mayor in his meeting with the Chief Executives around joint communications and forward planning. One of the great things about the IRMC is it will bring together that somewhat siloed approach that we've had between agencies. So we need a joint comm strategy, far more headroom and advice through both social media, our media platforms, and our methods of communication. We need to be a lot clearer as a maintainer and an access provider of the true health of our network. We're in a place now, as I mentioned, with understanding our asset because we have an evidence-based one now. We have more knowledge of that asset, what it looks like, and we can therefore we can forecast when disruption may be and when we may need bus replacements. I think your point is well made in terms of the plan. The plan is to use the IRMC as the lever to get both AT, AOR and KiwiRail comms in one place and work collaboratively on disruption programs and advise our public far earlier than we are. It's a work in progress. I haven't got an answer other than that it is one of the 3 or one of the 4 priorities I put up at the start, which was the alliance approach, which includes joint comms and just being better at what we're doing. It is unacceptable for people. We understand that, and we've been challenged by the Mayor. So it's at Chief Executive level. So we're very it's front of mind.
Oh, awesome, thank you. And just one more, please, Chair. You know how we got no more light rail. So are you guys still doing some work on how we get some options to those communities that were relying on light rail to finally have a train service? Like Mangere Town Centre, you've got no train, you just catch a bus. Just the same kind of thinking that we're trying to do with East Auckland by giving them an option of getting on a bus because they got no train out there. So what about these other areas that are just still stuck in the 70s?
Yeah, look, that's well founded, and I suppose that's more of a strategic sort of and a political question around the strategy of rail and how we connect communities. That is one of our key things, is connecting communities. That's what we do. Again, it comes to prioritisation, funding and the strategy, and I think that message needs to be included in the conversation. I haven't got an answer other than that, but at the moment it's not in that priority list, but it is in our thinking. But we just only have so much we can do with how much funding we have. Thank you.
Ferry?
Thanks. I have 2 quick questions. One is following on from Councillor Fletcher's point about grade separation, also known as level crossings, and acknowledging that does sit more with Auckland Transport than with you at this stage. However, you're an important part, obviously, of that conversation. I have requested several times that we have a workshop on this as this committee. And in September last year was assured we'd have that workshop in March. It still hasn't been scheduled, and I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but I suspect Councillor Fletcher and others will be very interested in us having that conversation too. Have you been asked yet to participate in some conversation with us and with Auckland Transport about the level crossing work and how we're going to progress?
Sorry, Councillor, there was a workshop yesterday.
Sorry, a workshop with Transport, with us.
No, sorry, I'll just probably give some context to answer your question. So to give it some context, yesterday there was a meeting chaired by AT and with Kiwi Rail, and we're landing a final position with respect to the workshop framework.
Oh, fantastic.
And so we'll be in a better position to give you an answer. So I've got two bring-ups for the next meeting: the Chief Executive advocacy for grade separation level crossing, and also a follow-up workshop update to Councillor Ferry with respect to her question.
Well, it's for all of us, it's not just for me, but
Sure,
yeah.
yeah.
And the other item I had was, and this might be something to take away and come back on, it's sort of we've talked a lot about the rail network rebuild and some of the other maintenance work coming and done. Where are you up to with the recovery work from the flooding impact, and whether that has had an impact on your ability to roll out some of that maintenance? And in particular, in regard to the Western Line, there's still some sites there that I understood were going to have some works done on them. The local board chair and I met with Kiwi Rail late last year and were promised a map and some timelines, and that hasn't been forthcoming. We've tried reminders through other mechanisms, so I'm trying it now.
Okay, with respect to the metro limits, in terms from Swanson through to Papakura, if you draw a sort of line west through south, all of the remediation works post the flood recovery have been completed. I'll make sure we follow up on a map. The NAL, which is the next contestable issue, is outstanding, due for opening in July, and we're running safety and compliance inspections across that line over the next 2 months. So in terms of recovery, all areas within the metro limits have been remediated. Some of them may still be under speed restrictions based on settlement, but they're all complete.
Great, thank you.
No worries.
All right, that brings us to the end of the presentation and questions. So thanks very much, John, Bobby and Bevan, for that, and for your offer to come back with that relevant information. That's much appreciated. It's been moved by the Mayor and seconded by Councillor Fletcher. Does anyone want to talk to the update? I think people have had a good shot at the questions there. Okay, all those in favour? Against? Thanks again, John, to you and the team, and
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
We look forward to seeing you at a future date.
Pleasure. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair and Council.
Okay, we've got another fairly substantive update here, folks, from the City Rail Link. We've got John and Sean here, so they're coming up and will give us a presentation on the latest that's happening with the City Rail Link. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. My name is John Bridgman. I'm the chair of City Rail Link, and with me is Sean Sweeney, the CE. I'd like to thank you for giving us this opportunity to come along this afternoon and update you on our progress and how the project's progressing towards construction completion. So we've got a presentation that Sean's going to run through that's will give you a very live feel for the project. We don't have a new fly-through like we did last time, but we've got some good photographs that'll give you a feel for the project and how it's progressing towards the sponsors' requirements. Sean will also address what has been an improving health and safety performance across the project, and how we're working hard to keep those involved in the project safe. And with that, also some success stories where the project has been rewarded and awarded internationally for the work that's been done. He's also going to touch on the overall progress we're making from a program perspective towards completion, and how that is progressing on track at the moment and the challenges that we face. He's also going to touch on the cost performance, which is a pleasing story at this stage. But the bit we're most interested in is the future challenges, and as we alluded last time, we're on a watershed time in the project as we shift towards the testing and commissioning phase. Civil works are largely complete, and there are significant challenges from a technology perspective trying to complete that testing and commissioning phase. We're babes when it comes to this stage in the project, and we're reliant on experience internationally where projects of this nature have found this part of the project particularly difficult. We'll also touch on our One Client Alliance initiative, and I just wanted to clarify, it's great that others are using this terminology, One Alliance, being copied is a fantastic form of flattery. Ours is an alliance between City Rail and Kiwi Rail and AT, and is aimed at the coordination necessary between those parties through the testing and commissioning phase to ready the project for day one operations and ensure that the parties are lined up and available for those and ready to contribute to the project necessary for that stage. So once we've run through the presentation, maybe, Chair, we can address questions at the end. So, Sean, do you want to lead off?
Thank you, John. Kia ora tātou. Okay, I'll just take you through a series of photos showing progress. Most of these photos are about a week old, so they're pretty current. This is the station at Mangawhau, and you can see the final cladding sky element is being installed. This is the North Auckland line platform, and you can see it's pretty much looking like its final state. This is the interior of the Mangawhau station with the escalators that take you over to the North Auckland line platform. Just another series of shots, other end of the platform, and I think that's the Fenton Street Bridge that's now in place. Some very large equipment required to run this project. We have a specific building at Mangawhau called the Vent Building, and you can see the very large fans that are being installed there to ensure the tunnels are properly ventilated. I took this shot last Friday. You can see the vent building on the left. The main point of this shot is you can see now the tunnels are all buried. The rectification, the reinstallation of the ground profiles that were there beforehand is well on the way. So if you were to wander over there now, you wouldn't understand that there's a railway actually underneath all of that ground. Going to Karanga-Ahapi, this is probably the most crucial station. It's the most complex station. It's, I think, 10 levels. It's narrow and constrained. We've got all the escalators in now. Down at station level, they are starting to look like station platforms. There's a lot of protection on the panels, but you can start getting a feel for what the final station or the platforms will look like. And this is the access way between the escalator down and the two platforms. Again, if you stripped all the protection off, you'd start getting a feeling for what the final stations will look like. So we're well advanced in that area. The big issue with Karanga-Ahapi is the services installation. There is some hundreds of kilometres of cabling that has to be installed, and often in very narrow, constrained corridors. And if you're working up above on cabling, there's things that can't happen down below. So it's a very confined areas, and it's a hard work for the Link Alliance at the moment to get all that cabling installed. They've just moved to a double shift to mitigate some of their production issues. At Beresford Square, you can see the final station, pretty much how it will look. Moving down to Te Waihoretu, or Aotea, I just put, that's a architectural rendering on the left, and you can see the actual building on the right. It looks pretty much the same as the rendering. That's the passenger entrance above Albert Street at Victoria Street West. Going into the station, at the circulation concourse, very, very much starting to look like a finished station if you took all the protection away. You can actually see loudspeakers, fire detectors installed in the ceiling. The main piece of work still required there is the floor. The flooring will be the last thing that they work on. Obviously, they need to get rid of all these cables and drums before they do that. Down at platform level, again, all the escalators are in, the elevators are all in. This is a shot which gives some sort of a feel for what the final station will look like. A lot of the cladding's now in, or it's well on its way. And again, the main item of work still in that area is the flooring. Again, we've got some massive plant, mainly ventilation fans being installed, and you can see the ceilings up above, well complete. I'll just move on to health and safety. It's a rolling initiative. You move out of one work phase and you move into another. What we're currently focusing on over the summer was heat stress, fire loads in the tunnels, and security. We're getting increasing break-ins in the site, particularly at Te Waihoretu. People seem to want to put themselves on social media in the tunnel, and that's a challenge that Link Alliance is trying to work out how to improve at the moment. We've had some recent events. We're always learning from events that occur. No one got hurt, but nevertheless, things to look at. What you can see there on that chart to the right is the progression of the health and safety performance in the last year. Total recordable injury frequency rate is the term. We're up near 5 March last year. We're down below 2 now. That's not an accident. That's been the result of a huge amount of effort and training of staff by the Link Alliance. Project awards. The project continues to be recognised in the industry and beyond for its achievements. Recently, we've had personnel win awards for Health and Safety Representative of the Year, and also what's called Enduring Impact Award with the Infrastructure Sustainability Council. That's an international award. Those are our 2 staff, Peter Pamale, he's now cover man on WorkSafe magazine, and Berenice picking up her award in Melbourne for her work, mainly in the mana whenua area and around social impacts and progressive employment scheme. In case anyone's wondering, we have got heavy and advanced engagement with all emergency services and emergency management, and currently that is running very well. And I think, if I could quote from my lead in this area, the emergency services are surprised at how big a piece of work the City Rail Link will be for them to manage, and they're just getting their heads around that now, but the interactions are very positive. This is just a schematic I put in there, not sure why, but just to show you the complexity of the whole railway and all the different moving parts that we have to consider. It's not just a couple of lines and 3 stations. This is a very high-level stretch program that the Link Alliance put together. The way they like to run is they set their teams very challenging stretch targets. They are not the same as our contract date. It's something they do internally. They believe, and they are an international firm, they believe this is the way they get best performance. But you can see the civil work is essentially finished. By the end of this year, all the fit-out work will be essentially complete, and we will really just be into construction largely complete by the end of this year. It's greatly complete now. and we'll really just be into ongoing testing and commissioning of the railway systems from there on. And you can see that runs for quite a period. Even though it might look like the railway is complete, there is a lot of work to validate and verify and prove that we can run a railway safely. Current progress, this is the last month's management report from the Link Alliance. It's a lot of data. Every month they report on what they were planning to do and what they've actually achieved. What you can see there is the civils, 99%, they're essentially done. The architectural fit out overall, they're about halfway through, and they are 97% on plan there. You can see where their challenges, the systems, they're about halfway through, but they're only 91% against their plan, and that is the area that is, I think, creating the most program pressure for them at the moment. They are 70% through the actual construction work done, but and 80% through on costs, so there are some cost pressures on them as well. Testing and commissioning, what is it? I don't expect you to read and remember all of this, but it is just to let you know there are a large number of different systems that they have to test. If you were wondering, there's rail systems, mechanical, electrical, fire and hydraulics, and all the things to do with communication and station and building management. They all have to be installed, tested individually, and then tested to work together. There's a huge amount of work being done at the moment to move to that point. All of the systems depend on critical control rooms being available and all their equipment being in them. So really one of the deciding elements of the progress of the job at the moment is what we call critical rooms. So the Link Alliance has now got critical room trackers across the 3 stations where they're tracking the progress of all of the rooms they need in order to power up and run and test the railway. The pathway from here, what is it? At a very high level, all the equipment has to have factory acceptance tests. We're about halfway through that. You then install the systems on site and check them again. You then connect them together and you test that. Once all the systems are connected and working with each other, you then start running trains through a multitude of scenarios, testing the systems working in live conditions. Once we have proved that the system works, we give the Link Alliance practical completion, and then it's handed over to AT and KiwiRail, and they will prepare for day 1 operations, which is a different thing. So the future challenges from now, all around the world, everyone says rail systems integration, all the range of systems I showed you on an earlier slide, getting them to work and talk together, then testing and commissioning a multitude of scenarios, and then you move into operational readiness and test running. Currently, the 2 biggest threats to us with regard to practical completion are the individual subsystems may not perform as we require, and then they may not talk to each other in the right way. Obviously, there's a lot of work planning for that. We have 31 test plan areas all being worked on, and we go through, they say 7, but it's actually 12 stages of testing. So the first, I'll try and simplify it. The stage we're in at the moment is installing and testing the equipment. That's that first arrow to the right. Once we've done that, we then test the actual systems, can work as subsystems and then as a railway overall. Once we're happy with that, there's 4 modes of train testing we have to go through before the Link Alliance gets practical completion, and then we hand over to AT and KiwiRail, and they do their readiness for operations and trial operations, and after that comes a day 1 passenger operation date. So just going back, I'll just focus on the last 4 stages, the testing of the systems and the running of the trains. Even this is very complex. We've got 4 different modes of what we call pre-dynamic testing. You start with one very slow train, once you've successfully achieved that, you increase the speed of one train and you test other things as you are doing that. I mean, they do things, first thing they have to do is test that the train won't hit the side walls of the tunnels. We were in Sydney last year watching them do that. They actually wrap the train in cotton wool and drive it through the tunnels and see if any of the cotton wool gets knocked off it. It's that scientific. And then they do things like they'll fill a train up with sandbags and practice an emergency stop in a whole range of different areas to see how it performs. Once we've got one train performing well, multiple train testing, again at limited speed, and then you start moving towards simulating a timetable. That's just the pre-dynamic. Once you get into that dynamic testing, that's testing the rail corridor in a whole range of scenarios and with a whole range of train operations. One of them is what's called degraded operations, where certain parts of the network aren't working properly. How does the system work? Can it work? And then we get into emergency procedures. We have a multitude of different scenarios that have to be proved and tested and showing that the railway can respond appropriately. An obvious one is a fire on a train, but it could be a health event of a passenger, extreme weather conditions, sabotage. All of these have to be worked through, and every aspect of the system has to do what it's expected to do. And then the last stage, readiness for operations. There's a huge amount of work to be done here. This is being led by AT and KiwiRail, but just an example, driver training. These are just indicative numbers. At the moment, we're looking at 230 training days, 240 drivers to be trained. I'm sure that number's different now. 364 classes. Number of trips in the tunnel. We have to schedule 1,200 plus trips in those tunnels. This is whilst the rest of Auckland is having an operating live rail network. That takes a lot of scheduling. All of this has to happen after we've handed over to AT and KiwiRail. It's not a 5-minute event for them to, and then they have to do all the things they have to do to get the stations up and running and ready to operate as well. Massive amount of documentation. We say the paper project is almost as large as the construction project. Just some order of magnitude, over 60,000 project documents, 30,000 drawings, 25,000 requirement statements, 4,000 testable requirements, testing commissioning tests, 1,500, 400 plus procedures all have to be worked through and then run. That's a lot of paper. We've developed, and the Link Alliance has developed a huge number of dashboards. I'm not meaning you to read these, but you can see all of that work is now being tracked on a range of dashboards. The one thing I'd show is if you see where the status is, that's generally the light brown, and the grey is what work yet to be done. You can see in most areas the large work is still in front of us in the testing and commissioning. You can see it again with these graphs. These graphs are updated weekly, so we now have a really good line of sight on the work that the Link Alliance is doing in this area. These are just more tracking dashboards that they've put together for us to follow what's happening. John touched on it. About the middle of last year, we came to a view that the best way for Auckland to get the best railway it could was for AT, KiwiRail and CRL to work together. And we're not a big enough country, and we haven't done this enough, that there's a huge body of expertise out there that we can all build our own teams. So we've decided to work together and share expertise and share resources. We've called it the One Client Alliance. And I think the byline is we've taken a view we will succeed or fail on this together, and that motivates everyone to work together. There's approximately 75 core personnel on that alliance. We are aiming to co-locate and collaborate and share resource and expertise. And as I said, the goal is to work collectively to ensure that Auckland gets the best outcome it can. Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. A lot to be said for working together in all things. We've good bit of advice to us too, I suppose, going into a long-term plan. Those visuals were very revealing, Sean. I think that's, that's a very encouraging sign to see what's there physically now, and in amongst, the rather subdued atmosphere of regional fuel tax removal and cuts and whatnot. It is reassuring to the people of Auckland that beneath the very city, this is all coming together and it's not that far off, notwithstanding the testing and everything that has to happen, and that's going to be a very significant asset for our transport network. So having said that, you had the presentation. It's open for questions. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. My question is really around the comms approach here, because I think we've got a lot of excitement and expectation, and helping people to understand the difference between it looks like it's finished and it's fully operational, I think it's going to be a really important story for us to tell over the next, I'm hoping, 1.5 years. But so what's the comms strategy here? Because obviously you can't give this presentation to every member of the community. How are you engaging with some stories for the community, maybe some collateral? I'm particularly concerned about Maungawhau Station, because that's obviously not a new station, so it's in a particularly difficult position where people are going to look at the buildings and go, oh, they're finished. We can get off the train again here like we used to, and that's not necessarily going to be the case. And there's also a possibility there of some of the pedestrian links being able to be opened up before you can catch the train there as well. So again, going to need some really good comms in that space. What's planned, please?
Well, I can't outline the plan here for you, but the point you've made is very real, and we're very aware of it, and there is a lot of work going into that. If necessary, I can come back with that response, but it is absolutely something we're aware of. There will be a point when people say, it's all finished, what's the deal? Why can't I run the trains? And we are working at communication which explains that. It is quite hard because it is a bit abstract for a person on the street. They will even see trains going into the tunnels from Maungawhau, and they will wonder, well, why can't we use them? So there is a communication piece of work, and that would be ourselves, AT and KiwiRail, working on that together. So we need to come back on that, because we are well aware it's coming towards us. As soon as the dust settles and the hoardings start coming down, people will wonder.
Can I suggest that you reach out to local elected members in the area? A lot of us have quite significant community networks and can give some advice, but also help share messages. And also, if you have a look at the Central Interceptor comms, some of their work's been really good. They've evolved it over time, and it would be worth talking to their team too. Thank you.
We've been doing some testing on our microphones.
If you don't use the mic, they can't hear you at all online, so that's why we're very pedantic about them.
That's working?
Thank you.
Keep going.
We are, I'm advised, planning another public walkthrough. For a long time, the Link Alliance, it was too hard to get into the headspace. They were too busy, but there are plans for a walkthrough. I think it'll be to Waihorutu. It'll be very managed, but that will be a great chance to get some of those communication lines out about, yes, you can see it all, isn't it wonderful, but you can't quite use it yet. So that's something that we are working on now.
Great, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Mayor Brown?
I'm not too keen on the succeed or fail together, but could you just succeed together?
That's certainly the plan.
And I mean, I've seen this stuff before about 300,000 tests of this, that, and the other thing. when this was talked about and they entered into this years ago, was this all foreseen or was this sort of a sudden surprise? I mean, it doesn't really surprise me, but I just wondered whether or not other people understood quite what we got into.
You're asking me to speculate, Mayor?
Well, I don't know anybody else who can.
Well, I wasn't there at the time, but I believe that unless you are an expert in a certain area, it would be a little bit of a surprise to you. I think the rail experts that were engaged at the beginning of the job would have just viewed this as obvious because that's their lives, that's the work they do. But the further away you get from those specialists, I think the biggest surprise about the amount of work to get a railway tested, proved, certified and ready to operate.
I hope they did have some experts there back then. They didn't have any experts at signing contracts. I just hope they had experts in doing this.
Okay, any other contributions? Councillor Hill.
Sorry, Chair. Just on, I assume because you're working closely with all the agencies that you have the thinking on board or enough staff being trained to do the, enough trained drivers and security and all the staff on the ground you'll need to do the, all the work, because you're obviously going to need actual drivers to do all the practicing as well as fit the normal network.
Yeah, that really falls to AT and to a lesser extent Kiwi Rail, but those resource requirements are AT's care, and it's a big lift for them. They assure us they're getting organised, and we work closely with them to ensure they do have those resources. But it's a journey that's just starting at the moment.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I know where the responsibility lies, but I guess you guys can't do your work if that hasn't happened on the other side. So it's good to hear that at least you all have that starting. Thanks.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. That's a very comprehensive update and a good insight into where we have to go from here and understanding the complexities of things. So I'm happy to move it. Councillor Fletcher seconded. Anyone wanting to say anything? No? Okay, all those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. So thanks again for the update. We look forward to the next one being even further along the road, or along the rail track in this case. The plan now, folks, is to expedite things a bit and then just have a quick little break before our confidential item. I know people must be getting a little stiff sitting, so we have a couple of what should hopefully be relatively pro forma items that we can dispense with. The first one, item 14, later, isn't it? The review of the forward work program. I'm happy to move that if I have a seconder. Councillor Ferry, any discussion or talk? All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Against? Carried. Next, similarly, item 15 is a summary of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee information memoranda, etc. So just voting to receive that. Councillor Fletcher, happy to move it. Have a seconder. Councillor Henderson gets his name on the scorebook. He's off the mark. Scrambles through for a quick single to the other end. Okay. Any questions? Okay. All those in favour? Aye. Against? No. So carried. Thank you. So that just brings us to the final public item, which will just as a prelude to then going into confidential for our last item, and this is item 16. We have jumped round a bit here today. The City Rail Link Mangawhau Development Update. Welcome Kate Cumberpatch from Iki Panuku and our own Michael Burns, the Head of Strategy. And they're just going to give us a brief update in public before we go into confidential to consider some of these matters. Welcome, Michael and Kate.
Thank you, Chair. The report is fairly brief update to yourselves as part sponsors of CRL project, just to give you an update on how the development is progressing. There is confidential item to talk about next, which is really around the value and the value of the development. In terms of the update, there's a number of development opportunities across the sites, largely around Mongofo. A lot of progress has been made on those, and we're working with CRL around some of the final pieces to ensure progress continues with the likes of Whenua Haumi Limited Partnership, Kainga Ora and Vector to start with before an open market process can commence.
Okay, unless there's any burning questions that people want to ask in public, we can just expedite things here and go to the matter in confidential. Moved by Councillor Fletcher, seconded by Councillor Watson. Not a lot of people rushing to put up their hands, he's saying you're tired. No one wanting to speak to it. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. And we now just have a procedural motion which will tie in with a short couple of minute break to go into confidential. So
I'll move, then give you a chance for somebody else, Councillor.
Who's that? Councillor Simpson.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Councillor Simpson, thank you for moving that. And yes, and we just and I'll second that. And we're just noting B, agree that John Bridgman, the board chair of CRL, and Sean Sweeney, the chief executive officer of CRL, will be permitted to remain for the item. City Rail Link development update after the public because of their knowledge of matters and may help in the decision making. All right, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? All right. Against? Carried. So we'll just have a couple of minutes break as we clear all the members of the public out of the public gallery. Bye-bye, Gail.
Chair, I'm having major technology problems today. I've been using my personal laptop because the council one. I'm just going to have to go downstairs and try and find out what the gremlin is. Thanks.
A couple of minutes to stretch your legs, folks, and then we'll go into this final